for those delegates not able to make this particular workshop. So firstly, to introduce myself, I'm Chris Orr. I'm the interim university librarian here at the University of Hull in the UK, and I'm presenting this workshop with my colleagues Nabila Jaffer and Karen Karyani, and I'll let them introduce themselves very briefly. Nabila.
Hi everyone, I'm Nabila Jaffer, Program Manager at University of Michigan Library IT, and on to you, Karen.
I'm Karen Karyani, Executive Director of the Media Library and Archives at WGBH in Boston.
Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen now and find the right presentation. So I'm hoping everyone can see that. And that we're now able to present. So I will crack on. So this workshop is about making repositories part of your digital strategy and basing it on experience from the Samvera community. What we wanted to do was cover a range of different things, but this is a brief agenda for what we want to cover in the next hour and a half. Is to start with you, so we'll have an icebreaker shortly. Then to consider the role of digital strategy and the connection with digital repositories in the context of how we manage our digital collections in our libraries. To then look at the experience that the Samvera community has had over the last 12 years of its existence. And to look at the vision that's come out of that experience, which is informing, well, has benefited our own strategies, our digital strategies, but is also informing other people's digital strategies. We'll then look at the three use cases of us speakers and where we've come from in our own institutions and the different ways in which we've developed our digital strategy and linked our repositories into that. And then we want to go over to you, since this is a workshop, it is not just us presenting. We want to get your take, your views, your ideas about what strategic drivers you are encountering or what you have within your own institutions, conscious that they can vary from place to place. And then also to look at whether or not existing solutions are meeting those strategic drivers, meeting those needs, and whether there are any gaps or what those gaps are. Because as much as recognizing that repositories have been able to serve digital strategy needs, we also recognize that there are continuing needs evolving and coming out, which we continue to need evolving our digital repositories to help meet. And much of this conference, of course, is all about how they can do that in different ways. And then again, drawing on the experience from the community, but also to some extent just broadening it out to the experience of other communities as well, is looking at three key elements of digital strategy around community, technology and people, and how they all connect repositories and strategy. Then we'll move on to takeaways and Q&A. So I'll pass over to Nabila now, first of all, to do a poll.
Thank you, Chris. Like Chris mentioned, that we just have a small icebreaker, and it would have been really nice to get to know all of you, but in these Zoom meetings, it's really hard. So we thought maybe the poll can help us a little bit. So let me launch the poll, and we're gonna do about like 45 seconds to a minute for you to take the poll. Let's see. Okay. Hope you all can see the poll. Okay, I'll do 10 more seconds. Okay, and thank you for taking the poll. And here we are, we can see we have 58% from Europe, and 33% from North America, and 8% from South America. Welcome, everyone. That's so nice to have you all here. Our second question was, how are you feeling today? And it's good to see we have neutral and excited, and hope by the end of this workshop, you might feel a little bit different, hopefully more excited. Maybe, I hope it's not apprehensive, but we'll see how it's gonna be. The last question we had was like, when I say digital, you think of, and it's interesting to see that mostly everybody can think of all the things, so all of the above makes sense, but there are a lot of repositories and archives as well. Wait, did I not share the results? Could you all see the results? Now I think you can see the results. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, I'll just go over the results so that you all can see the results too. Okay, I will stop sharing the results, and back to you, Chris.
Okay, thank you very much. So welcome there, and thank you. It's good to have. One of the great joys I've always had from open repositories over the years has been the international flavour and the way that we're all working on this across the world in different circumstances. Intrigued also by that last question that when you say, I did say digital, what you say, and recognizing all of above. No one closed strategy just by itself. Now that may be a good thing in a sense that when we think of digital strategy, it has to be in the context of other aspects of what we mean by digital, but interesting to see. So to start off with digital strategy. So digital strategy itself is something that can be defined in different ways according to different circumstances. And I don't pretend to be able to definitively say that this is what digital strategy is and how repositories are going to meet it necessarily, because clearly the digital strategy for one institution might be quite different to the digital strategy of another institution. Instead, I just wanted to highlight the broad nature of what a digital strategy might be looking to try and achieve. And I liked this particular quote, and there's many of these across the internet as well, but I like the way this one was phrased, which was that digital strategy looks for ways to use technology to transform activity and therefore business. So ultimately it's about not just doing the technology, not just using the technology, but using the technology for a purpose and making sure that we actually are applying it to the activities that we carry out and the business that we carry out. And just by association, just to reflect that the difference between that and an IT strategy is that an IT strategy aims to transform the technology in itself without necessarily thinking about the business per se. At least that's that interpretation. I suspect others might disagree, but that's a useful distinction in terms of understanding what a digital strategy is looking to try and achieve. What that does is suggest then a question, so what is our business? And I was quite struck by the Library of Congress definition of our business in their digital strategy, which is to move users along a path from awareness to discovery to use, all built around the information, the content, and the data that in that case, the Library of Congress, but which we all hold within our organizations. How do we move our users along a path from awareness of that content, to finding it, to being able to use it? When we ran a version of this workshop at an event last year, a Samvera event, admittedly, we asked people to indicate what they considered to be important to digital strategy in their context, in terms of how it impacts on their business. And we generated a word cloud from that. And we wanted to share this just by virtue of just broadening out the sharing about reflecting what other people had said in terms of their understanding of digital strategy and how repositories related to that. But in terms of then taking forward our business, there's a view there that it's about making sure we have the right infrastructure, making sure that what we put in place is usable, so that there is high usability and people are able to make effective use of it. That it should be open, and I think the theme of this week and the context in which we have open repositories makes that self-defining to some extent, but it's important that we recognize that in the context of what we're trying to do. And then a whole range of other terms related to the collections we're managing, the applications we need as part of the repository infrastructure, making sure it's efficient, making sure it's sustainable, making sure we have the right investment, thinking about the effort and the time we need to put into it, how flexible it needs to be. There's a whole host of different things here. And I think what this drives us to understand is there are many different facets to what it means to actually make a repository work in the context of our institutions and in the context of a digital strategy. But for thinking about our repositories in the context of a digital strategy, that we are trying to effect change in the way we carry out activity, it can help us to inform how we address each of these different aspects. Of course, one of the reasons why we build repositories, and we have to think about, is we're dealing with digital content. And one of the parallels that's sometimes useful to draw is, well, how would we actually tackle these questions about strategy, irrespective of digital or not, when it comes to managing our physical collections, and how would we go about doing that? So our libraries hold physical and digital content collections, but most of them, I would imagine, start off with physical collections. And we have, over the years, developed very careful structures, very careful infrastructure to look after our physical collections in ways that help us to help people become more aware of them, to help people discover them, and to help people use them. There's a question then that when we're talking about our digital collections and thinking about our digital strategy and how the digital strategy affects our business of how we use technology, is what are we actually looking to try and put in place on an equivalent basis that helps us manage our digital collections? What infrastructures, what do we need to put in place in order to ensure that we're able to provide the same ability to increase awareness, discovery, and use of those digital collections? How do we prop up the content? How do we hold up the content so that it's there for people to benefit from? I'll hand over to Karen now to talk a little bit about how we've tackled that within the Samvera community.
Thank you, Chris. So I'm going to start off with a little history and background of Samvera, so to get you to see where we're coming from. In 2008, roughly speaking, the community was formed as the Hydra project, as many of you might remember Hydra. And it was to develop a tool set over Fedora. Fedora was seen as a good open repository solution, but it was rather difficult to get materials into and out of Fedora. So the Samvera or Hydra project people came together to sort of develop ways of making it easier to get things in and out of Fedora, since we all had this need as Fedora users. In 2010, there was the first software commit as a community to solve this issue and this problem. In 2011, the first production rollouts happened, local solutions and some common tool sets. 2012, a formal partnership was formed among the people who were interested in the Hydra project, now Samvera. And in 2013 was the first release of Avalon and Sophia, which were packaged tool sets to sit on top of Fedora to help solve the issues. Avalon was primarily audiovisual and Sophia was more generic. In 2014, we had our first Samvera Connect conference, where the community of people committed to this issue and this problem, committed to working together to solve these problems, came together face-to-face in a conference. In 2017, Hydra became Samvera. Because of the titling issue, we couldn't use the word Hydra anymore, so the community as a whole decided to call ourselves Samvera, so we are now Samvera. Hyrax and Haiku were released in the same year. Those are two other toolset solutions that sit on top of Fedora. 2018 to 2021 was the maturing of the community and some products. We started working on some community documentation in terms of how we're governing ourselves and how we're coming together as a community. And at the end, we're focusing on enabling to roll your own package solutions or to suit your needs. So in some cases, the community is working together to come up with the package solutions. And in many cases, people in the community are off kind of using the tool sets of their own and building their own solutions. So next slide. The community structure currently, as it is set up, is we have partners. They are institutional partners. It's not a single person or a single entity. It is an organization. And those institutions are formally committed as a member. There's a board of directors that is elected by the partners. These are stewards of the project and are individual memberships. There are 9 members of the board of directors that are serving overlapping 3-year terms. And that, I think we've just gone through our first full cycle of that, where now everybody who's on the board of directors were elected by the partners. The roadmaps alignment group is a group that is overseeing the individual components and the roadmaps to ensure alignment across the board for the community. So coming up with major goals and major issues for the technology and trying to map out a timeline for them to happen so that everyone kind of knows what's going on in the community and no one's doing double duty or working on something that someone else is working on. There's a whole slew of working and interest groups that people can get involved in at any level, a manager's level, a developer's level, a user level. And the groups are usually aligned with issues and problems that people have come up. They can spin up and then spin down once they've sort of solved their problem or their issue. Some of them are ongoing, like the marketing group, which is what Chris and Nabila and I are all members of. And they keep going. And then there's a developer community. There's a very strong developer community with community committers, people who are actually writing code and committing code for the Samvera community. And then there are adopters, people who are just kind of sitting on the sidelines and looking at what's being developed and trying it out. And both are welcome into the community and both are very active, and input is more than welcome. So next slide. So why did the Samvera community do this? What drove people to work together? As we all know, collaboration is a wonderful thing. Collaboration can also be very difficult. And the reason was because everyone saw that we had a common need. Building a digital repository to manage our digital files and our digital content, regardless of what it is, audiovisual, text, images, photos, that we wanted to use. Originally it was because we all wanted to use Fedora, and Fedora was proving to be challenging to work with. So looking across the community, people realized that we all needed some functionality and some tools in order to help us do this better. And since we all have the same needs, why don't we work together to create something that works for all of us, or at least share stories and share code where it makes sense in order to further all of our goals. So the goal was to build a platform that allowed for flexible, localized requirements, either standalone or in the cloud. So there's all kinds of different varieties of how people are using the tools. Some people are using instances purely in a localized version, and some of them are using the cloud. And we're working together to sustain the solutions. I personally truly believe that that the more people that are working on the same issue and the same problems, the more sustainable they are in the long run, because no one institution is necessarily responsible for the long-term maintenance or the long-term sustainability of anything. And helping each other to learn about and take advantage of technical innovations. I mean, this is really the core of it all, to tell you the honest truth, is where people come up with great ideas and you share the ideas, and one person may take it off in this direction, someone may take it off in another direction, but you all come back together again to share those innovations and to share those pathways in order to make it better across the board. Okay, next slide. The Samvera vision is Samvera is a vibrant and welcoming community of information and technology professions who share challenges, build expertise, and create sustainable, best-in-class solutions, making the world's digital collections accessible now and into the future. That is our current vision statement. And as you can see, it's Samvera Connect. Every year at Samvera Connect, we take a photograph of the current community. So we have a wonderful collection of photographs from a very small community to quite large community. It's quite a wonderful thing. And it's a very welcoming community. We actually miss each other, having not been able to see each other in person for the last year and a half. But it's quite wonderful to be able to attend Samvera Connect and to see each other in person again. We're looking forward to that. But anybody can join, managers, developers, users, and I highly recommend that when we do have the next in-person, please attend, but the next virtual one will be in the fall. So please keep your eyes out for that. Next slide. The Samvera Partners are a wide variety of institutions. Here's a list of who the current partners, and the next slide will show you our geographic spread. We are across the world, heavy use in North America and in Europe, but it's slowly spreading throughout the other geographic regions. And if you look on the right side, it's the collection of the types of organizations that are partners. There are large universities, small universities, colleges, public broadcasting, I think that's me, government ministry. There's some national libraries, national labs, small research labs, national digital repositories. It's across the board, a museum of performing arts and a Shakespeare festival. So any institution and any type of institution is welcome. And I think that's it for me. I think I'm handing it back to Chris.
Okay, so thank you very much, Karen. What I wanted to do is, we talked about Samvera there, but we just wanted to reflect, of course, that Open Repositories incorporates coverage of a wide range of different other types of repository. And just wanted to set, in the context of this workshop, actually set out a couple of pieces about two others. So certainly from the point of view of Fedora, there is another solution which is about Islandora in terms of providing a front end to Fedora. Of course, you can take Fedora by itself and create your own front end, but Islandora provides you with a Drupal front end to Fedora. And the reason why I wanted to sort of present this and the other case study, which in a moment, is to reflect in a sense that in terms of taking forward our digital strategy, we might actually have different ways in which we want to implement that, or different abilities to be able to implement different solutions and so forth and so on. So one of the things that Samvera provides is that ability to be flexible. You can either decide to take the tools and build your own solution, or you can actually take one of the products that have been produced as a sort of package starting point that you can then build on. Islandora takes the view of creating these package solutions as its default approach, and using that ability to produce a package solution for, say, research data, or a package solution for images and so forth and so on, covering multiple content types, and then you can implement whichever ones you have a requirement for, again, in order to serve your digital strategy. They also have a strong community, and I think that's a common base both of this, ourselves in Samvera, but and many of the other products that you will encounter this week at the conference. And they also have a range of interest groups, again, based on the fact that, and this of course is, I think, telling in its own sense, is that when people do get together and discuss their needs, they do realize that, of course, you're not on your own. There are actually aspects of what you want to do in order to achieve your goals that are actually common with other people. And it's useful then to get together in those interest groups in order to forge the solution that you feel would work best on a mutual basis. And they also have global implementation coverage, because I'm not trying to be competitive or anything like that. You can see they've got quite a few dots themselves around the world. But equally, I think there's a recognition that, again, the solutions are not necessarily tied down geographically. They can apply and they can be of value, and the communities to an extent way beyond geographic boundaries of the origins of these systems. The other one I wanted to highlight was DSpace, and I think there's, and again, in a sort of spectrum of different ways of tackling this, as mentioned, Samvera are looking at, focused on the ability to be as flexible as you can be, realistically. Islandora have provide flexibility, but at the same time are providing quite well-defined package solutions that you can then choose to use as you feel is appropriate for your needs. And then DSpace is very much always focused on being an out-of-the-box repository solution approach. So very much here, take it, implement, bang, off you go. Very much focused on the institutional repository use case. And of course, dependent on your digital strategy, what you're trying to do with your content, that may suit your needs, or it may be that you need something else in order to meet the content collections that you're trying to find a solution for. At the same time as focusing on a single use case, they very much want to provide a core set of functionality that can be extended at this bottom there, or to integrated with complementary services and tools in a larger scholarly ecosystem. And one of the other learning points I think that's really come out of open repositories in the last few years, and also within the different communities that operate or to produce and deliver these different repository solutions, is that repositories do not sit in isolation. And that a digital strategy and considering the overall approach and direction of travel in terms of managing digital content, increasing awareness to it and delivery and use and so forth and so on, is that repositories will sit quite often sit alongside other systems, other pieces of the overall infrastructure and the overall part and the solution that you put in place or looking to put in place. So when Samvera started, for example, I mean, one of the questions that can be asked when it comes to developing a repository and meeting digital strategy needs is, well, what is my content? And how do I manage that in the most effective and sustainable way possible, as it evidenced in that word cloud we saw earlier. And you can imagine that many different collections might have one or more of these examples of different types of content, be they theses, books, articles, images, audiovisual, video, research data, maps, documents, and so forth and so on. It has to be said that when Samvera set off down the path, there was a hope, in a sense, that it would be possible to create a single digital repository that could help to manage all of these. Because there was a reluctance and a recognition that if maintaining multiple repository solutions was perhaps not the most sustainable way of managing these systems over time. Samvera very much does allow you to do this, and quite often, in many ways, people have taken DSpace and done the same thing. It depends on what you then want to be able to do with the content within that overall system. At the same time, pragmatic reasons, be they staffing, technical support, actual use cases, and so forth and so on, have sometimes suggested that it makes more sense to have multiple solutions that sort of align with each other, fit to each other, talk to each other, but actually are focused in on managing different aspects of your digital collection. There's no advocacy here about whether one approach is right or one approach is wrong. It's about recognizing that if you have a range of content, then your strategy may be to follow one or other of these different routes. And there are examples of how you can benefit from each by looking at the community. To give some specificity to what I've just been saying there, we wanted to share our own experiences of the three of us on this talk, starting with myself at the University of Hull, and then I'll hand over to Karen to talk about examples at GBH, and then to Nabila to talk about the University of Michigan. So at the University of Hull, we were fortunate enough to be involved in the very early days of what was then Project Hydra, as Karen described, and now Samvera. And we created our repository initially using the initial tool set. We then redeveloped it based on the very rapid developments in the code that was coming out of the community at that point in time. And the version that we had put in place was now from 2014. Which in technology terms might seem to make it quite old, but one of the great things about the implementation and what has come out of the community is that what we have put in place has been wonderfully stable, which means we've been able to carry on with it probably longer than we might have anticipated over time. We followed the institutional repository use to the extent of wanting to have a single repository that could manage everything. The reason why we wanted to do that is that we are a mid-sized university. We don't have a technical resource. We do rely on external support now. We did have a developer who built this for us, but unfortunately they then left. So we find ourselves in a difficult situation. But with the help of the community and engaging with the vendor to provide external support, we've been able to continue using this and very successfully too. So We also recognized at the same time, though, that we did not have the resource to be able to support multiple repositories. And acknowledging that we recognize we might not necessarily be able to manage every use case within a single infrastructure like this. Certainly all our primary use cases and all our primary digital content collections that we had a need to manage strategically over time were met by me following this particular path. Our primary use cases were theses and also, for internal purposes, past exam papers, the two most popular collections that we hold. But we also hold many things in there. We've had journal articles, we have research data, we have some images, we have some videos. The functionality may not be as sophisticated as some of the more recent and developed solutions that are available now, but it's doing what we wanted the repository to do, which was to hold the content securely over time so that it was available for use as and when it became of value to provide that. Notwithstanding that institutional repository approach, we have also been developing an alternative infrastructure based around the more modern version of Samvera's software, Hyrax, which is looking to try and link Hyrax as a repository into an overall architecture that is about providing digital preservation capability. The Samvera community went through a period of time in the early days where it was trying to embed the preservation functionality within the repository itself. And there was a realization at one point that that was potentially making the repository more than it needed to be, and that the repository itself should focus on what it was good at and connect into other functionality as and when that was appropriate to do so. And what we've sought to do in this development here is to link the repository into a preservation tool, Archivematica in this case, which allows us to then pass content that needs digital preservation through Archivematica and then into the repository where we can then manage it over time and also deliver it through an online catalogue. There is also, if you want more details of this, then we did actually give a presentation at OR 2 years ago in Hamburg, which described this in a bit more detail. More recently, we have been looking at the concept of taking the what's in the repository and shared through a catalogue and trying to create online exhibitions of that. Again, very much about focusing on that, increasing awareness, delivery and use, discovery and use aspect. This is another diagram that shows to some extent on the left-hand side the same as I've just shown on the previous slide, which is where we're connecting up Hyrax to Archivematica in order to provide that digital preservation capability. But this slide is intended to highlight how the benefits of a digital repository in this context and the benefits of what we were able to get from Samvera are allowing us to consider how we might take our original use case, which was to use a single repository to manage multiple different types of content, and apply that in this case. So we very much started down the path of creating the digital preservation infrastructure with the repository solely focused on that use case. But because of the ability to extend Hyrax to actually manage other types of material, we are in the process of actually building an image repository in the same instance of Hyrax to allow us to manage those images in that context, in that same space. We don't know to what extent how far we'll be able to push this and how far we'll be able to stretch it. We're managing our development in alignment with the use cases that come up, and therefore recognizing our digital strategy is evolving over time as circumstances and the needs of our institution evolve at the same time as well. So that's the University of Hull. I'll now pass over to Karen to talk about GBH.
Hi. So at WGBH, we have two Samvera use cases. One is for the American Archive of Public Broadcasting, which is a collaboration with the Library of Congress to have a national effort to preserve public media material, both radio and TV, as much as and make it as accessible as possible via a digital library website. Next slide. For the AAPB, the American Archive, as we like to call it, we manage the metadata in a central repository. It's all audiovisual files, almost exclusively. We are public media. That is the main collection that we are managing. But we needed a place to manage the metadata and have our contributors, which are stations from all across the country, give us metadata and be able to edit it, be able to batch inload, be able to batch edit, and to export. We then export the data, which we then put on our website, along with links to the proxy files. For the AAPB, we're using a hybrid version of Hyrax and Avalon to manage the metadata. We use a standard called PBCore as our cataloging schema for the description of audiovisual content. We find that it's we actually developed the schema. It's being used by a number of audiovisual collections across the country. It allows you to track instantiations of an item. If you have large audiovisual collections, you understand that you might have 5 copies of a program title on different formats, which is pretty typical. So rather than making so the program title, the program itself, the concept of the program, it ends up being your main item, and everything else is an instantiation. So that program on a 1 inch, that program on a 3/4 inch becomes different instantiations. So you're not constantly having to repeat the content and the description of the item itself. So that's PBCore, and at the time, there was not a solution of Samvera or Hydra using PBCore, and Avalon is the main tool solution or instance that uses audiovisual in the Hyrax community, in the Samvera community, excuse me. And so at the time we were developing this, Avalon was also looking to move to more of a Hyrax solution as it's kind of its base. So it was going to kind of take all of its tools and coding and break them apart into more modular individual tools doing different things. I guess our project timeline was moving a little bit faster than Avalon was. So we sort of built something, it's sort of a combo of Avalon features and built based on Hyrax using PBCore as the metadata structure. So that's what we're using to manage the metadata for the American Archive. Our other instance, the next slide, is GBH recently got a challenge grant from NEH to digitize 1/3 of our collection, which is about 83,000 items on audiovisual materials on obsolete formats. And we needed someplace to put these digital files and to make them accessible to our internal staff. So we implemented an instance of Avalon straight up, just took whatever the latest version of Avalon was at the time and brought that up at GBH. We're using that instance. It's a way for us to put all of our digital files and our updated metadata in order to allow internal access to the files. And it was an easy way for us to just quickly have a repository for us to put this material and put this metadata so that we can make it more accessible quicker. Next slide. So that's just for internal access. And at the time we are actually trying to figure out how we're going to merge these two things together. Most likely we'll be migrating things from Avalon into our AMS2, probably doing some improvements on the AMS2 to make it more up to date with the current Hyrax code. And then what we do is we export that data for our websites, which are based on solar and blacklight at the moment. Never know, that might change. But so those are our two instances. We look to the community for updates on Avalon, and we've been working with a couple of the vendors in the community to help us with improvements to the AMS2, particularly with ingest. And it's been great that there is such a wide variety of people that we can turn to look for help. We are a small shop developer. We only have 3 developers. So we look to the community for updates on code. We looked to them to help us out with when we need improvements. And it's been much better for us than to try to do it ourselves, for sure. So thank you. We'll turn it over to Nabila.
Thanks, Karen. So this is about University of Michigan. And at Michigan, when we think of our technology strategy, we keep in mind our relationship with open communities. Our philosophy is to promote the productive partnerships between technology and services. So there are a variety of open source communities we depend on and actually work with for providing technology solutions to our stakeholders, which aligns with our higher purpose of leveraging technology to continually improve value for the faculty, students, and staff who depend on the Michigan Library as part of their scholarship. Next slide, please. So how does these community fit together? And there are several different solutions. So how do we pick which one aligns with our guiding principle of providing modern services for our digital content, providing sustainable, scalable digital repository service with consistent, equitable access? And why do we want to invest in any of these communities rather than working on our local priorities and building the software ourselves? And also we keep thinking of what makes us a good partner. So these are some of the many questions, and we don't have answer to all these questions, but we do think of all these questions when we work with different communities and think of our local needs and our stakeholders. Next slide, please. We also think about coherence across layers of our solution, like how do our solutions fit together? So this is the picture of some of the community software in production. As you can see on the interface layer, we use IIIF application, we use IIIF. On application layer, we use Blacklight, Samvera Hydra for our two solutions. One is for Deep Blue Data and the other is Fulcrum, which is a publishing platform. And we use DSpace for our institutional repository. And on infrastructure layer, you can see we have Fedora, we use also file system, and we also work with AP Trust. You can see HathiTrust has its own interface, application, and infrastructure layer. Here we can also see that there's vertical coherence between the layers. Then the question comes up, what about the horizontal coherence? Can our users search both data and documents in institutional repository? So at the moment, they cannot. So this is something we are actively thinking of and working on and building it in our strategy, that how can we provide coherence and alignment within our systems. Okay, next slide, please. So this is the big picture of our whole web presence strategy. I know it's a lot of things going on here, and it's really hard to get to everything now, but I'll just give you an overview. And just to note, the numbers are not current, they are a couple of years old. So this is just to give you an idea that how our digital ecosystem look like. You can see the open source communities at play here, and the library website is kind of the main interface where users come to, and that connects with different websites. At the same time, our users go directly to the research data website, and they also go to the institutional repository. But the library website connects with our repositories to provide some search and browse functionality. Digital collections are still running on our old legacy platform, DLXS. And you can see catalog, digital exhibits, archives, finding aids, subject guides are all present and interconnected via Blacklight search interface. The staff internet, as you can see down below, is another important aspect of our web presence. The main library websites provides different kind of searches like article search or catalog search and such. So that was all from Michigan use case. And next slide, please, Chris. Okay, so now is the time where we're gonna be doing some workshop-like stuff. And we have prepared our Jamboard. So as you can see on this link, and maybe it would be easier to put the link in the chat. So we will go on the Jamboard, and over there, Chris, can you also post the link in the chat so everybody can access that?
Oh, there it is, yes.
All right.
There we go.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I hope you all can access the Jamboard. It's an open whiteboarding platform system where we can just take the sticky notes and post the sticky notes here. This page doesn't scroll vertical, so you'll have to go to the next page if you are done with this page, if this page is filled up. And the question we are starting with is naming 3 key strategic drivers in relation to your digital repositories and the management of digital content collection. So if you think of your digital ecosystem, how does digital repository fit in there? And what are the 3 key strategic drivers that you think of while creating your strategy? And if there are any questions, maybe we can, you can just either raise your hand or unmute yourself and just ask the question. It's not a webinar. You can just unmute yourself and ask the question. So are there any questions? Maybe we can wait for a minute and see. Okay. Okay, so it seems like there aren't any questions. So let's get started on the board. You can always post a question in the chat. So, and we're gonna take like a few minutes. Let's just start with 3 to 4 minutes and see where we are. Yeah, the board is looking really cool. I love the different colors. And I think in Jamboard, as when you post a sticky, it just comes on top of each other. So it's nice that we are moving those stickies as well. Let's say maybe we can do 30 more seconds or a minute. It seems like we have a lot of ideas here. Okay. Yeah, thanks for putting all the stickies in. I see, I guess. Chris, are you trying to put them in affinity groups?
Yes, I've been just trying to sort of put them together a bit more.
That's great. Okay. I don't know. Okay. So our next step on this was to have some discussion, and then we're going to build on this thing with another question. So let's get to the discussion. And it would be really nice if you can unmute and share your thoughts. So if anybody wants to get started and share your thoughts while you are putting the post-its, that what are the open questions in your mind, and what are the things you felt that looking at this, that others are also thinking about the same things. Or is there anything else, Chris, you can add to it?
I suppose what in my take on this was that we asked for these strategic drivers because it's useful to understand exactly, or for people to share what their drivers are, because it helps to, and I think it helps to see that other people may have the same drivers, and we've seen some instances of that, assuming it's not the same person putting the same things up more than once, but we've seen where there are connections there, definitely. I suppose what would be interesting to understand is to what extent these use cases are I mean, they are repository use cases in many ways, but how do they impact on other aspects of digital strategy as well, beyond the repository?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. If you were in person, it's so much easier. We can have like small groups discuss and then share with others. But I know with Zoom, it gets a little bit tricky. But if anyone else has some other ideas, please do share. Yeah. Ilke, go ahead.
Hi, Nabila. Hi, Chris. It's just to say, it's not really a question, or I was just thinking, first of all, that was a great, I think, coverage of about the need, the institutional need. This big digital strategy doesn't always get resolved with one solution. So I really like, what you said actually in the presentations, like you may need to think around, what you actually need, and there might be different solutions that you need to accommodate or adopt actually in one institution. So when I was trying to put my own, drivers, I also realized that, this doesn't always, get, there's no one solution, or there's no one, repository to tackle all these needs. Yeah, I just wanted to share this comment just to see what others think as well.
Yeah, thank you. Yep, totally agree. And that's where these communities play a big role, because it's like these interest group and working groups is where we can get started thinking about those ideas, that there are so many institutions having similar needs, then how can we work together? And this is one thing I really love about Samvera Community, that when I started working at University of Michigan almost 5 years back, I was new to this community and new to Michigan. And it was really helpful to see how other people are working on the similar issues. And just joining those interest and working groups was really helpful to see how others are solving these problems, or we can maybe work together on solving some of the problems. Any other thoughts?
I would also say, in speaking to the notion of having perhaps not one repository for everything, but when you talk to other institutions, even though their needs might be different than yours, there might be some commonality on one thing or another where you can say, oh, I've got that same problem in a different formulation, but I can possibly use some of the things that you're developing over here and switch it just a little bit to use it for my own needs. And that is another really great benefit of the community and sharing our challenges together.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Absolutely.
At the risk of putting someone on the spot, I'm intrigued by the sticky that said resource allocation, and to what extent that is impacted by digital strategy, or whether it is actually a driver in its own right.
Hi, I'm the person who had added that to the list. And I mean, I think it's both. I do think that resource allocation is part of what can drive your strategy. I mean, you only have so many staff members, you only have so many hours in the day, you only have so much budget, and that impacts what you can do and what services you can develop and what you can focus your time and energy on. So that's why I added it here.
Yeah. And I think it's a very valid point. Thank you very much. I think that's an important aspect to it, because I, in one level, if you actually looked at all of the different stickies there and you thought about all the different things you potentially could do, then it would be it's difficult, and therefore we do have to make decisions about how we apply our resource. I mean, to pick up on Karen's point there, and I think that's certainly from a whole point of view, one of the reasons why we engaged in the communities that we have, like Samvera, is that we don't have the resource locally, and therefore if we can combine what we do have available to us, or what we can tap into with other people, then we get more benefit out of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was also looking at these resource allocation and also with integration with other softwares, other solutions, because we have this issue as well, that we already have some existing solutions and now we have a Hyrix repository. Then how do we integrate with the existing solutions? So it is really great to see here, like integration and with in-house systems. I'm I don't want to put someone on spot either, but it would be nice to hear from others what kind of in-house systems you want to integrate with other solutions too.
That in-house solutions, actually, I just put that comment because I usually hear, from people when I speak to any other colleagues. So the first thing that you hear is that usually they want to get more metrics, and they want to integrate these systems with HR systems or research assessments. Yeah, that's really, that was my point, putting in-house integration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks. That is very true. And also I'm looking at like good reporting functionality. That is also like the usage stats and, okay, what you just mentioned also, like what the discoverability looks like. So, yep, they all go together. Okay, so I think we slotted 10 minutes for this and we are at 10 minutes. So let's move on to the next board. And on your Jamboards, if you skip 2 pages, you'll be on the page number 3, because we kept first 2 pages for the first questions in case we overflow on the first page. So if you come to the 3rd page on the Jamboard, excuse me, you would see this question, that how do available system options match your digital strategy needs? So thinking of the key drivers you put in, and given what we know the available system options are, this is more like available solutions. And how much do they fit your strategy, or what are the gaps, and how much in-house development you still need to do? So if we can just take another, let's say 2 to 3 minutes to put some sticky here and list, just like, you can either list like the names of the solutions you're using, or just in generic, if they do fit your needs, and what are the gaps that are not filled by any of the softwares, or you are already working on that. Is there anything you want to add, Chris or Karen?
No, this is not intended to be any sort of system bashing or anything like that. It's just a genuine I suppose it's just taking an opportunity to reflect on whether or not the existing solutions are meeting our digital strategy needs, because it helps us to then understand better mutually where we perceive gaps to be, and therefore where some people may be able to fill those gaps, and where they are genuine gaps that we could reflect on as a broader repository community on how to fill.
Absolutely. Yep. Thanks, Chris, for adding that. Okay, so let's take 2 minutes. Yes. Okay, so that was about 3 minutes. And I think we have good enough sticky to get the conversation started. And thank you, Chris, for putting them together. It looks much nicer and cleaner and all together. So that's nice. Okay. So again, I want to just open it up. Like while you were putting up the stickies, are there any thoughts that you would like to share? We do see lack of resources here, and which is always an issue. And I think that is one thing in strategy to think of. How can we deal with that? Because it's like I think that is something always like it's hard to get resources. So how can we utilize the resources that we have to the best possible? Yeah. I also see the user expectation section, like what are the users' expectation? Are the current system meeting those needs? One thing in our experience, I found that the technology is moving so quickly that it's hard for these systems to keep up. Like the systems we are using, their interfaces are not according to all the new, more like profitable services that are, so the open source interfaces don't have enough resources to match what other paid services are providing. So that becomes some of the times an issue, that users don't know what software we are using, but they expect the same interfaces as they're used to of using other places. Yeah. Any other thoughts, anyone?
One of the points I would reflect is they're looking at some of the headings there, and having reviewed the program for this week's conference, is that there's a number of these topics which are covered by other presentations in the program, which is maybe an indication that there are other people working on these areas, and therefore there is stuff that can be shared for mutual benefit.
Yeah, right. Yeah, thanks for bringing it up. Let's just spend about a minute or so more on this, and then we can go to our other slides. I'm also intrigued by how to make data more fair. If would like to know more about that.
It looks like a number of people are frustrated with metadata. The need for more flexible management of metadata. That's a tough one.
Yeah. Okay, so in the interest of time, Chris, I guess you want to continue with the next slide. Thank you, everyone, for your engagement with this. It was really nice to see all your comments there.
Okay, I'll just move on to the next slides. So what I wanted to do now in the next few slides is take the experience that we've shared from both Samvera and reflected on in those other two communities, and then some of the thoughts that you've just shared as well, and sort of wrap them up into three areas that we feel have been generically beneficial to considering how to make repositories work as part of your digital strategy, and in particular open source repositories in the context of this conference and this week. One thing I wanted to draw your attention to is something that you may wish to take advantage of more generically about how, when deciding about who maybe to engage with and how they're up to, is that Lyrasis carried out a project a couple of years ago called It Takes a Village. And the principle of It Takes a Village, or ITAV for short, as it's sometimes quoted, was to assess projects, or allow projects to assess themselves, initiatives, in order to define how mature they were, and to help them identify which areas it would be valuable for them to try and address if they wanted to continue developing in the right direction. Samvera itself carried out its own analysis, which was reported at CNI at the end of 2019, which highlighted these different areas. So the four areas, governance, technology, resources, and community engagement, were considered by Lyrasis as being the four areas that were important to ensure sustainability in a community and initiative, to allow people and give people the confidence that engaging with them and making use of the products and services and so forth and so on that come out of them is a worthwhile and strategic investment. So in terms, you can see from the Samvera point at the end of 2019, we were at phase 2 with governance, and they limited it down to 3 phases. Well, 4 phases, I should say, sorry. So phase 2 was growing technology, stable but not static. I think we were continuing to evolve, but not necessarily finished as such. Resources, in terms of what we could make available, again, we were growing those, and community engagement, we were growing those as well. My personal opinion is that the 18 months since then have seen us actually continue to evolve and follow the path of development that we wish to take, to the extent that I would say that governance is probably now at phase 3, as in it's actually it's stable but continuing to evolve, and likewise community engagement is phase 3, and that's because we've been able to recruit a community manager, so we have more stability in the ability to coordinate community activity. But as a generic tool and as a generic assessment, it's a very valuable way of understanding how different open source communities work and how they are developing over time. And that sense of community is the first basis upon which we'd say that it's a way of identifying or a way of making sure that repositories sit comfortably within a digital strategy. And I think some of our comments around some of the post-its probably reflected that as well. We have to recognize many open source initiatives are based around a community, and I think over the last 10 years it's become even more and more important that that community is the basis upon which they develop things. It isn't just creating the solution and then building the community. It is about building the community first, because that is what gives them their strength to be able to go out and then to actually develop some technical solutions based on identified needs, based on identified drivers to meet strategy. And that was very much Samvera's starting point, was the community, not the technology itself, but the technology flowed from that. And those communities thrive through shared commitment. So we have a partner model in Samvera. Other communities like Islandora, they have a different way of organizing that, but they have these organizations which through different means have actually committed to supporting each other and continuing to progress the development of the software and the community itself. Importantly, from a Samvera point of view at least, but other communities have taken a different view, but largely all of these have some form of relationship with vendors as part of that community. And I think that's also part of that understanding of open source solutions, which is that as much as we might like to think open source is free, we can just take it, we can play with it, we can do what we want with it, quite often they are now complex enough or detailed enough that we need to have a certain level of in-house technical support to be able to do so. And whilst that's always going to be a good thing with the way that we use software going forward in terms of our engagement of technology more broadly, having some form of relationship with a vendor can quite often be the way that many organizations have to take it forward. It's definitely the direction of travel that we've had to take at Hull, but it's been a very fruitful one. Particularly because that vendor has also become a partner of the community. Communities don't run themselves, however, so we have developed a contribution model because we need to have financial stability as much as anything else. And we have that based a level of contribution that's based on the size of an organization. And that has enabled us to recruit the community manager, but it's a case of then sort of investing so that the community is stable enough and can develop and grow further beyond that. And ultimately becoming greater than the sum of its parts. And I think ultimately that's what we're all trying to achieve. Key to maintaining the community is regular communication, both online, as we've all experienced over the last year, and very much where we can face-to-face, as Karen mentioned earlier, where we can meet up like at our annual conference, then that brings huge fruit in its own right. Of course, once you've got the community, you then need to think about the technology, and we've referenced the different areas and products that Samvera has produced over the years that can be made available for that purpose. But the key here is about trying to identify what is the level of technical engagement that you want to actually engage with. You want to be able to, is it the case of actually saying, I want to be able to use a platform and a tool set and then actually basically play? When we started Samvera, we kept referencing Lego sets. The ability to be able to take a set of tools and combine them and play with them as we saw fit. Yes, you can do that. Yes, it's great to be able to do that. It does require a lot of technical investment to be able to do so. But you do come out of it with the solution that you would need, fit to your purpose. Do you want to start with a product, an established solution you can adapt and build on, which is the approach that these different Samvera products have taken, the way the approach that DSpace highlighted in the principles that I shared on the slide earlier as well. Taking something, implementing it, but then building on it so that you're taking advantage of a lot of community activity that's given you the basis, the core platform upon which you can build on, but in a more mature basis. Which makes a number of assumptions about what works, what doesn't work. It's not a complete flexibility, but it does give you a good starting point. Or alternatively, are you more in the case of saying, I need to work with a vendor in order to either get them to build me a solution based on those tool sets, or to provide me with a hosted solution based around the platforms that they're able to provide. And there are vendors out there who can provide both of those approaches. If you do want to engage in the technical development of a product or a repository, because that's important to you as part of ensuring that you meet your digital strategy through meeting the very specific needs that might have around the content that you're managing, then it's a case of making sure that the way you engage is informed by good practice and doesn't end up tying down the resource too much. From a Samvera point of view, we've learned sometimes the hard way that we needed to have a set of community principles that ensured that everyone was actually working on the same page and that we were able to, even in a distributed way, all contribute towards the overarching benefit of each of us. And one of the key learning points that we took from a library community, which predominantly we have come from, is that there was lots of generic distributed software development practice in the world out there, in business, in commerce, in different sectors and so forth and so on, which we initially did not know about, but which we have learned a lot about. And it was a real eye-opener to us that, as much as anything, our digital strategies are not bound by having to create library solutions. Those solutions can be informed by engaging with sectors outside of the libraries as well. Of course, you've got community, you've got the technology, you need to have the skills associated to do that. I mentioned earlier then that, of course, our engagements with technology generally within our organizations are such that we do require enhanced specific technical skills. Repositories, again, depending on what level you're looking to try and engage with, will require that level of specificity in the technical skills you need in-house. Communities, Samvera is an example, but again, the others all do it as well, provide training opportunities, predominantly online, of course, at the moment, but equally hack days or hack camps or developer camps when we're able to travel and meet face-to-face as well, again, in the future, we hope. But it's about developing the skills of the library staff more generically. So, I mean, quite often when we talk about these repositories, this conference came out of a set of technical engagements between those people creating repository systems. But importantly, the community needs to recognize that we have many members of our colleagues in the libraries, in our organizations, who do not necessarily engage technically, but which also are involved in the digital curation and the management of the content, the discovery of the content, the promotion of the content, who would equally benefit from being part of the wider discussion and picture in order to be able to serve that overall. There are opportunities such as the various conferences to showcase local skills to others through sharing the experience of internal developments, and that's all about building professional reputation and fostering those links with others who may be able to assist in the future. And then that's about, again, highlighting the fact that there are many different activities within a library which would benefit from engagement with repositories because they are contributing towards the digital strategy, even if they're not necessarily directly involved in the technology themselves. So, for example, Samvera has a number of interest groups related to repository management, to metadata, to user experience. Some of the Islandora user groups were very much aligned in the same way. And they're all about involving people who are very much involved in what the repository can do to deliver our services, but are not necessarily technically engaged in the same way. It's all about highlighting ways in which repositories and digital collections can be one of the library's unique selling points. And ultimately, our collections have been, the buildings that we have put our collections in, physical collections in, have been our unique selling points. Developing our repositories, engaging people within our organizations, is about actually then making sure that that digital alternative, that digital equivalent, it continues to be one of our unique selling points and can help to deliver and be part of our digital strategies. So the takeaways from today are to ask about how your repository as infrastructure connect with your digital strategy. Infrastructure was one of the big words in that initial word cloud I showed you, and I think what's important that came out of that was recognizing that we're not just talking about an application, we're talking about this is a piece of infrastructure in the same way that we might consider building a building, albeit that that may not just be the repository in itself, it may be the repository alongside a number of other systems as well. We would advocate that it's important to find a place to share and collaborate to meet your digital content strategy needs across the different people and skills involved, be they the technical people in your organization, be they the non-technical people in your organization. And then it's important to consider your needs and then review the range of technical solutions and the ways in which you can engage with those technical solutions, and so that you can take the right path that's fit for your digital strategy, your resourcing ability, and your ability to deliver the services that you're committing to. All of this is about basically engaging with the community. And this week in the Open Repositories is very much a community. Most of the products have communities around them. And they all drive their strength and resourcing from the members and the very contributions made to those. It's a question to ask, could you bring something to the table if you're not in the position where, or you're not in the position where you're doing so at the moment? Clearly, open source software you can adopt freely, but the advocacy I think we would want you to take away from this is that there is added value from participation because it helps to develop the maturity, it helps to develop the flexibility, it helps to develop the range of ways in which those solutions can help serve your digital strategy needs. That's the end of this presentation. Some more resources just to highlight here related to Samvera. These slides will be shared through the Open Repositories website, so you'll be able to access them subsequently for access if you so wish. And that's for both the managers, the doers, and the makers. If you'd like to get in touch and discuss more related to Samvera, that's what we can help with. We have these 2 Google groups, which you're welcome to post questions on. We're also we're one of the sponsors of Open Repositories this week, and we have an open stand or booth, which you're able to access at certain slots during the next 3 days. So please, if you have any questions specific to Samvera, then please drop in. We're very happy to take those questions and meet you. And we wanted to also showcase that there are a number of other Samvera sessions here at Open Repositories which talk to many of the themes that we have raised in this workshop today and highlight the different ways in which people might have shown how they can link their repositories into the digital strategies that they have at their own institutions. And it highlights the networking sessions there as well, the Samvera networking table. Additional to that, there are a number of other sessions here. I did a review of the program. Just wanted to highlight these few here. There may be others in the Madness in the 24/7 of specific instances, but there were some interesting presentations within each of these slots, which I think reach out and look to demonstrate how other institutions have met different digital strategy needs, how they've adapted their digital strategy, particularly in that first one about how people have adapted to COVID-19 and how repositories have been useful in assisting them in doing so, and also being able to showcase what the repository can offer in such an environment where digital access is so primary. But otherwise, we'd like to say thank you very much indeed for your attention and attendance this afternoon or morning, wherever you happen to be. And we'll be happy to take any further questions you have in the remaining minutes we have before the formal end at past.
Chris, we have a question in the chat.
Yes, so that was from Lynn. I have to say that I'm speaking from the UK, but I work with my colleagues, and Wheeler and Karen are based in the States. The community manager, Heather, is also based in the States. And the arrangement was that the post was created at one of the partner sites, Emory University in this instance, and the recruitment was then done by the community, an appointment made to the post at Emory. So there were equivalent issues to the ones that we would might usually get at UK institutions when they had to go through the process at Emory, not least because of the impact of COVID, which has had quite a dramatic impact on budget setting at a number of institutions across the world. But with perseverance within Emory, that they were able to push that forward and make the appointment. I should say that's on a fixed term basis initially, and then we will review it. I think it's initially for 2 years, and then we will review it for subsequent years accordingly.
One of the arguments that I have made for my budget to be able to contribute to the Samvera community is that we're not paying a license fee for a commercial product off the shelf. You know, it's not free. I do have to pay developers to be on board in order to help sustain the technology, but I am not paying an annual license fee and maintenance fee.
Okay, I think if everyone's no further questions, and just to allow people to make sure they can log into whatever next workshop they may be going to this afternoon, I'd like to say thank you very much indeed to everyone, and enjoy the rest of the week and the conference.